Alex had always craved the solitary silence of the world's most forgotten corners. As a seasoned traveler, he found peace only in the isolation that remote, uninhabited places offered. This time, he was drawn to the stark, desolate beauty of the Nevada desert, vast, endless, and far from civilization. His destination was Harlow's Crossing, a small abandoned town tucked into the edge of the desert, known only to a handful of locals who still whispered about it. It was mid-afternoon when Alex's old pickup truck rattled down the long, straight highway, the heat rising in shimmering waves off the cracked asphalt. The bright sun beat down, nearly blinding him as it reflected off the sand dunes stretching into infinity. A quick glance at his GPS confirmed he was nearing his destination, but something felt off. The map of Harlow's Crossing had not been updated in years, and Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this town had been forgotten for more than just time. His truck's engine hummed as he turned off the main highway onto a dusty road that seemed to lead nowhere. The dirt path was poorly maintained, a winding track of uneven rocks and sand, barely noticeable beneath the scorching sun. The further he drove, the more the world around him seemed to close in. The high desert mountains loomed on one side, while the vast emptiness of the sand stretched before him like an unbroken sea. As the road began to narrow and twist, Alex's truck rattled and creaked beneath him, struggling with the uneven surface. He looked around and saw nothing but the endless horizon. No signs of life, no wildlife, no sounds of civilization, only the wind that seemed to whisper to him through the cracked windows. Despite the oppressive silence, there was something unsettling about the stillness of the desert. Then, through the haze of heat rising from the sand, Alex saw it. A rusted, half-hidden sign by the side of the road, its once vivid paint now peeling and faded. It read, "Whispering Sands, keep out." Alex couldn't help but chuckle. It was an odd name for such a barren place, but there was something captivating about it, something that beckoned him forward, urging him to continue. He drove on, the road grew more uneven, the sand more shifting. The truck's tires kicked up dust, and the air inside became suffocatingly hot. Despite the dry heat, Alex felt the unmistakable chill of something else in the air, a coldness that seemed to seep into his bones. The road twisted again, and the landscape began to change. The sand dunes grew taller, and the mountains behind him seemed to close in, casting long shadows over the path ahead. The wind shifted abruptly, pushing against the truck as if urging him to turn back. But Alex was determined to see where this path led. He had come this far. There was no turning back now. After another hour of driving, Alex began to notice a strange sensation creeping over him. It wasn't the heat, nor was it the loneliness. It was something deeper, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. The air grew heavier, the world around him more still. Even the wind, which had been restless moments before, seemed to die down. He drove on, but the path ahead seemed to shift. The horizon remained the same, yet Alex felt as though the landscape had subtly changed. The road was now barely a trace in the sand, and what was once dry, barren desert now seemed to pulse with something darker. He tried to shake off the feeling, but it lingered like a shadow at the back of his mind. His eyes caught sight of something unusual up ahead, a figure standing in the distance. A woman, draped in a flowing white dress, her hair wild and untamed, standing motionless in the middle of the road. Alex slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching as he came to a sudden stop. His heart hammered in his chest. The woman did not move, not even an inch. Her back was to him, and she remained silent, unmoving, as the wind swirled around her. He squinted, trying to make out her features, but the sand whipped around her like a veil, making it impossible to see her face. "Hello?" Alex called, but his voice felt hollow in the vast emptiness. No response. Panic bubbled in Alex's chest as he checked his surroundings. The vast emptiness of the desert had swallowed him whole. There were no signs of life, no animals, no vehicles, just endless sand and the woman standing in the middle of the road. He honked the horn, but the woman didn't flinch. Instead, she slowly turned, her head tilting at an odd angle as though she was staring right at him. Alex's heart skipped a beat. Her eyes, hollow, black, and sunken, met his gaze. In a flash, she turned and disappeared into the swirling sands, vanishing as quickly as she had appeared. Alex's hands trembled on the steering wheel. He wanted to get out, to check if she was really gone, but a deep sense of dread gripped him. He forced himself to drive forward, hoping to put some distance between him and whatever had just happened. But the air felt different now, as if the desert itself had grown heavy, suffocating. The whispers began, soft at first, like a murmur carried by the wind. But as Alex drove deeper into the dunes, they grew louder, more insistent. He couldn't understand them, yet they felt familiar. They seemed to be beckoning him, drawing him in further. Hours passed, or perhaps it was only minutes. Time had become irrelevant in the desert. Alex felt as if he was caught in a strange loop, an endless cycle of sand and whispers, like the land itself was playing tricks on his mind. The road had disappeared. He had no idea which direction he was headed, and no matter how far he drove, the landscape remained the same. Featureless dunes, the faint sound of whispers in the wind. Suddenly, he saw it. In the distance, barely visible through the rising heat haze, a building appeared. A shack, old, weathered, its wooden walls rotting in the harsh desert air. It seemed to have appeared out of nowhere, as though the sand itself had birthed it from the earth. A strange compulsion pushed Alex toward it. The closer he got, the more the whispers seemed to intensify. They were no longer just in the wind. They were inside his head, like a chorus of voices urging him to stop, to turn back. But he couldn't. The shack was his only option now. As Alex approached, the door creaked open by itself, revealing a dim interior. Dust motes floated lazily in the air, and the scent of decay filled his nostrils. The floorboards groaned beneath his boots as he stepped inside, his heart pounding in his chest. On the walls, old photographs hung crookedly, faded by time. The faces in the pictures were blurred, but the more Alex stared, the more he felt a chill creeping up his spine. There was something unsettlingly familiar about the people in the photos. They were all staring at him, even though they were from different eras. One photograph caught his attention. It was a black and white image of a group of people standing in front of the shack, and in the middle of the group was a man who looked exactly like Alex. Before he could process what he was seeing, the door slammed shut behind him, plunging the shack into darkness. Alex's breath quickened as the temperature in the shack plummeted. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, swirling around him like an invisible storm. He couldn't tell if they were in his head or if they were coming from the walls themselves. The air grew thick with an oppressive energy, the weight of the desert's ancient curse pressing down on him. Desperate, he ran to the door, but it wouldn't open. The sand beneath his feet began to shift, rising from the cracks in the floorboards, like tendrils of a living thing. Alex's heart raced as the sand seemed to close in around him. His vision blurred, the whispers turning into a maddening chorus of voices, each one saying his name. And then, the woman appeared again, standing in the doorway. Her eyes were now empty black pits, her face twisted into an expression of hunger. She reached out toward him, her fingers elongating, stretching as though they were pulling the very essence from the air. Alex tried to scream, but no sound came out. The room seemed to spin, and the walls began to close in on him. The last thing he saw before the darkness overtook him was her mouth opening wide, revealing rows of jagged, broken teeth. When the local ranger arrived days later, the shack was gone, swallowed up by the desert. There was no sign of Alex, no trace of his passing. The desert had taken him, just like it had taken all the others before him. And as the wind howled through the dunes, the whispers of the sand remained, waiting for the next traveler to listen too closely, to follow the call, and to never return. Three co-workers, Mason, Tori, and Elijah, were driving back to Los Angeles after a tech conference in New Mexico. Tired of the interstate and eager to shave off time, Mason suggested a shortcut he saw on an old printed map, a narrow desert route labeled only as Service Road 103 not maintained. Tori hesitated. No one takes that road anymore, she said, eyeing the dry, cracked desert horizon. It cuts 4 hours, Mason insisted. Besides, it's just dirt and cactus. What could go wrong? They took the turn late afternoon. No signs, no other cars, just a straight, sandy road slicing through endless red rock desert. An hour in, the temperature dropped unnaturally. The wind died. Their GPS glitched, spinning the location dot in circles. Cell signal vanished. The sun dipped behind the mesa cliffs, and that's when they saw the town. It wasn't on any map. A rusted sign barely held up by splintered wood read, "Welcome to Dust Haven, population." They thought it was abandoned, a row of empty boarded-up buildings, an old gas station, a church, and a diner with flickering neon letters. Open all night. Hungry and low on gas, they parked and walked into the diner. The bell on the door jingled. Inside was warm, clean, and full. People sat silently at booths, not talking, not eating, just staring, eyes wide, unmoving. The jukebox played a warped version of Blue Moon. Then, the waitress turned around. She looked normal, but her skin was dry, like sun-baked clay. Cracks lined her cheeks. Her eyes were too glassy, too still. "You're just in time," she said, smiling without blinking. "Sundown's the feeding hour." Mason laughed nervously. Feeding hour? No one else spoke. Just a buzz in the ceiling lights. Then the door slammed behind them, and the jukebox stopped. The silence, after the jukebox stopped, felt loud, buzzing in their ears like static. Elijah reached for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. Locked, from the outside. Tori looked around. "They're not moving," she whispered. "They're not blinking." Mason stepped back, trying to laugh it off. "Maybe it's an art project?" Then the waitress moved closer, her heels clicking eerily loud on the checkered floor. "We don't get many travelers," she said. "But when you come through Dust Haven, you stay, like the others." She nodded toward the still diners, who now, very slowly, all turned their heads to look at the group. Their faces cracked, literally. Dry skin peeled in small flakes. One man's cheek split open like porcelain, revealing black ash underneath. "Have to go," Elijah said. The overhead lights burst in a shower of sparks. In the dark, they ran behind the counter, through a kitchen reeking of rot and dust. There was a back door, unlocked. They burst out into the alley behind the diner. But the town had changed. Buildings were now warped. Wooden frames twisted like they'd melted. The church bell rang, though there was no wind. And from the shadows between the buildings, figures began to emerge. Shapes. Not human anymore. Their bodies were dried husks, thin limbs, sunken faces, empty sockets. They dragged their feet across the sand, whispering something in unison. "Stay, stay, stay." The trio ran. They reached the gas station, hoping to find shelter or a working vehicle. Inside was empty. No attendant, just a cracked mirror and old road maps. But on the wall behind the counter were dozens of photos, Polaroids. All of them showed people, standing in front of the diner, smiling. In the oldest photo stood Mason. He stared at it, stunned. Same face, same hoodie. But it was dated, August 2nd, 1985. I've never been here before," he said. But his voice was shaking. Then a voice behind them spoke. "Yes, you have." They turned. It was the waitress, her face now entirely cracked, eyes hollow, and her smile impossibly wide. Elijah grabbed a tire iron from the ground and swung. Her body shattered into dust. But so did the light. Darkness swallowed the station, and outside the whispers grew louder. "Feeding hour never ends." The station plunged into darkness. Only the faint red glow of the diner's open sign blinked far in the distance, the only source of light in the entire town. The whispers now surrounded them, crawling under their skin. "Feeding hour never ends." Tori grabbed Mason's arm. "We have to get out of town. We run, now!" They burst from the gas station, sprinting across the sand-covered street. Elijah led, guided by a sliver of moonlight peeking through the dusty clouds. But the town was different again. The road back was gone, replaced by sand dunes, jagged fence posts, and crumbling buildings. "Look," Tori pointed. A truck, old, rusted, but real, sitting in front of a sunken hardware store. They climbed in. Keys were in the ignition. Elijah turned them. Nothing. Then, a whimper from the back seat. Mason turned slowly and saw a boy, maybe 10 years old, sitting with his knees pulled to his chest, staring out the window. Tori whispered, "Hey, are you okay?" The boy didn't move. He just said flatly, "You can't leave. Dust Haven doesn't let you." And then, he vanished. Just like ash blown by wind. Suddenly, the truck roared to life. They didn't wait. Elijah floored the gas. The truck lurched forward, bumping over cracked road, through broken signs, past the diner. Figures emerged from the alleys, from rooftops, dry, twisted silhouettes trying to block the road. But something was wrong. The town kept going. No matter how far they drove, the buildings repeated. The diner, the gas station, the church, over and over, like a carousel from hell. Mason shouted, "It's a loop! We're stuck!" The truck sputtered, then stopped. Dead. Outside the windows, everything froze. The whispers were gone. Then, a soft knock on the windshield. It was Tori, standing in front of the truck. But she was already inside with them. Elijah turned slowly, the Tori sitting next. To him stared ahead, eyes unblinking, and smiled. The skin on her face began to crack, just like the others. Mason screamed. Everything went black. A week later, a state trooper found an old truck in the Nevada desert just outside an unmarked trail. The engine was cold, covered in dust, no tracks leading in or out. Inside were 3 seats, empty, no blood, no signs of a struggle. Just one thing in the glove box, a faded postcard. On it, an old photo of a smiling waitress in front of a retro diner. On the back, "Visit Dust Haven. You'll never want to leave." The desert had never unnerved Detective Carla Monroe, until the day she arrived in Dune's End. The town wasn't on most maps. Hidden beyond cracked highways and endless dunes of rust-colored sand, it was the kind of place that whispered its existence only to those already cursed by it. Carla had been dispatched to investigate something that didn't belong in a police report. A town of 6 residents who had vanished overnight. No signs of struggle, no distress calls, just empty homes, half-eaten meals, and eerily ticking clocks. She'd arrived with Deputy Marcus Briggs, a quiet man who hadn't spoken much since they crossed into the desert. His great-uncle had once lived in Dune's End, he said, and warned of a thing called the Shadow Swell. Carla chalked it up to local superstition, but something in Marcus's eyes said he believed it. Deeply. When they pulled into the town, the stillness hit harder than the heat. No birds, no insects, not even the hum of power lines. Just the whistling wind dragging sand across silent roads and peeling paint. Storefronts stood abandoned, motel doors swung open, and a rusted playground creaked with invisible motion. They made camp in the old sheriff's station. Dust covered every surface. On the walls were missing person flyers. Some dated back decades, all unsolved. That night, they powered up the backup generator and tried to rest. But sleep didn't come easy. At 2:17 a.m., a burst of static cracked from the dormant police radio, loud enough to jolt Carla awake. She staggered over, confused. The radio wasn't connected to any working line. The static faded, replaced by something low, something that sounded like a voice. Faint, male, whispering. "You shouldn't have come." She snapped the radio off, but the voice continued. The lights flickered. The room dimmed, and through the front window, beyond the swirling sand, Carla saw movement, something tall and thin, barely visible, standing in the street. Then, 3 slow taps echoed on the glass behind her. She turned, but nothing was there. Only the shadow of her own reflection. except it wasn't quite matching her movements. The morning brought no relief. The desert sun rose blood red, casting long shadows over Dune's End, but the air was heavy, unnaturally still. Deputy Marcus had barely slept. He claimed he heard footsteps circling the station all night, but found no prints outside. They reviewed the station's old security tapes, and what they saw made Carla's stomach twist. From midnight to dawn, the footage looped the same strange pattern. The outside cameras showed static, but in the faint flashes between distortion, a dark figure stood across the street, closer with each flicker. It never moved naturally. One frame it was near the A church, another at the station steps. And then, just before the feed cut out at 4:07 a.m., it stood right outside the front door. Carla paused the tape and looked at Marcus. He was pale, shaking. "This isn't a person," he whispered. Later, that day, they checked the town's chapel. Dust covered the pews, but the altar was clean, recently cleaned. There were fresh markings beneath the wooden floor, symbols scratched into the dirt, shaped like spirals and eyes with open mouths. Voice recorder left on the altar began playing on its own. "It doesn't walk, it remembers. If you see it, it already knows your name." A loud bang cut through the silence. They ran to the motel nearby, where a single light flickered in room 6. Inside, they found the shower running. No one there. On the steamed-up mirror, a handprint was pressed from the inside. They wiped it, but behind the glass was not their reflection. It was a room, just like theirs, but empty, decayed, rotting with mildew and sand. In that mirrored version, someone stood in the far corner, facing the wall, motionless. Then the woman in the mirror tilted her head, not toward Carla, not toward Marcus, but toward the viewer. The mirror cracked from the inside. They fled. As night fell, a sandstorm rolled in from nowhere. The town vanished beneath orange haze and shrieking wind. Carla and Marcus barricaded themselves in the station once more. That's when the scratching began. In the walls, under the floorboards, inside the vents. And then, Carla's phone vibrated, a text from an unknown number. "You're already dreaming. Wake up before it remembers your face." Carla didn't sleep that night. Neither did Marcus. The sandstorm outside howled like it was alive, hurling grains against the windows with unnatural force. But inside the station, something worse stirred. The scratches had stopped. Now there was knocking. Soft, rhythmic, from every wall at once. They sat in silence, guns ready, though both knew bullets meant nothing against whatever this was. At 3:13 a.m., every light in the station flickered once, then went out. Emergency backup hummed on, painting the station in a weak red glow. That's when Carla saw it, her reflection in the glass of the station's vending machine. But she wasn't standing. Her reflection was crawling toward her. Backwards. She turned in panic. Nothing there. Then the phone in the lobby rang. An old rotary that hadn't worked in years. Marcus picked it up. He froze. After a few seconds, he handed Carla the receiver with a hollow look in his eyes. "It's your voice," he said. "But it's not you." Carla hesitated, then lifted the receiver. What she heard chilled her blood. "Stop watching. Start remembering. You were here before, Carla, and you never left." She slammed the phone down, but the line kept buzzing, until it slowly turned into breathing. Suddenly, the floorboards under Marcus's feet cracked. He dropped, gone. No scream, no crash. Just vanished. Carla fell to her knees, pounding on the floor. It was solid again, like nothing had happened. Then she heard his voice. "I can see you, but you can't see me." His voice came from the walls. Frantic, Carla tore through every file in the sheriff's station, desperate for answers. Hidden beneath old personnel records, she found a dusty journal wrapped in twine. The sheriff's handwriting was unsteady. Final entries mentioned nightmares, mirages in the sand, and one name over and over again. The forgotten one. A deity, perhaps. A force. Worshipped by ancient desert tribes long before Dune's End ever existed. It didn't kill its victims. It removed them from memory, from time. That's why no one remembered the missing. That's why their photos faded. That's why Marcus had already been erased. Carla checked her phone. No texts from him, no photos, no contacts saved. It was like he never existed. And then, something breathed on her neck. She turned. The vending machine's glass no longer showed her reflection. It showed the station, rotting and decayed, buried half in sand, and her, standing outside it. But the version of her in the reflection? It smiled. And that version blinked twice, even though Carla hadn't blinked at all. Arla backed away from the vending machine, her heart pounding like war drums. The smile in the reflection widened, teeth long and shadowed, inhuman. She stumbled into the hallway, only to hear the front door creak open behind her. But she had locked it hours ago. She turned slowly. Footprints in the sand. Led inside the station. Barefoot. Wet. Like something had climbed out of the ground. The storm outside had gone silent. Utter silence. No wind. No humming power. No breathing. Except hers. She crept toward the sheriff's office, the only room with a lock she trusted. But as she reached the door, a faint light glowed beneath it. Someone was in there. Carla flung it open. Marcus sat at the desk, head tilted, eyes vacant. His skin was pale, almost translucent, like he had been drained of color. "Marcus?" she whispered. He didn't move, but behind her, his voice. "Don't trust the one in the chair." Carla turned slowly. The Marcus sitting before her smiled, with too many teeth. She ran. The halls of the station twisted, doors shifting locations, rooms she hadn't seen before appearing like an impossible maze. Her phone was gone, her sense of direction useless. She was trapped inside a building that remembered more than she did. In the evidence room she found mirrors, dozens of them, all covered in thick cloth. Why? Because reflections in Dune's End didn't show the present. They showed the truth. She uncovered one mirror. Her reflection stared back, but behind her stood all the others who had vanished. Some were whispering, others weeping, all mouthing one word: stay. Suddenly the reflection Carla stepped forward, her real-world mirror shattered without touch. A cold hand grabbed Carla's shoulder. She was yanked through the broken glass. Carla woke up, in a desert, alone. The sheriff's station was gone. Just miles of open sand and sun overhead. She screamed Marcus's name. No echo replied. Eventually, headlights appeared in the distance. A truck pulled up. A woman inside leaned out. "You okay? You look lost," she asked. Carla hesitated. I think I worked here, at the station." The woman frowned. "There's no station out here. Hasn't been one in 60 years. Carla looked at her hands. They were covered in dust. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the truck's side mirror, but it wasn't her face. It was smiling, and it didn't blink.